There are so many paintings of ships on the ocean. It's an appealing subject matter that speaks to many people, including myself, but this image by Loria Norman is unique. It's in the collection of the Smithsonian American Art Museum, and although it depicts a common subject matter, it does it in an exceptional way. This image is unusual and would stand out amongst many different images that tackle the same subject matter. As an artist, sometimes you need to tackle the really common subject matter for a painting. It's a good challenge for your artistic practice. If you create work that speaks with your voice, it will still be individual. Loria Norman creates artwork like nobody else, and that's her biggest strength. The colours in the ocean are beautiful. There are greens, blues, and warmer colours that reflect the warm colours in the sky. The balance of colour is excellent. It's titled Shipwreck, and you can see the rock in the ocean that you presume is part of a collision. On each side of the image there are mountains that seem to force the ship into the path of this rock. There is a sense of waiting for the disaster to occur. Yet the image is so beautiful, it doesn't create a feeling of danger. The only sense of danger is the red flag that is flying in the wind. It isn't a criticism of this piece of artwork, because when I look at the image, it reminds me that in life, some things need to be destroyed. They need to fall away, and that's a natural process because it's the only way that life can move on. You can either fight the destruction that is coming your way, or you can try and find the beauty and the value in the experiences that you face. The image conveys a level of acceptance that speaks to me. The artist does unusual things in this image. She could have chosen a contrasting colour for the ship so it would stand out more. It would have made it a bigger focal point, but instead she uses a few thick lines to give the ship greater substance. You can recognise it as a ship, but it doesn't shout on the canvas. It doesn't immediately draw the eye to that area. However, it does create a different feel to the artwork. It makes it more dreamlike. The piece is titled Shipwreck, so perhaps it's a memory of the ship that existed before the disaster. It's an image that breaks many traditional conventions. It depicts a disaster as a beautiful fantasy, and yet I wouldn't want to change a thing about this image. The image contains a healing perspective that's filled with acceptance, and just viewing it encourages me to believe that everything will be fine. Storms come and go. I find this artwork so compelling, and I feel inspired to create a piece of artwork with this image as a starting point. It's a process of creative study where I want to learn more about this image by bringing it into my own artistic practice. It's a bit like singing along to a piece of music and discovering new things from that interaction. I begin by just adding orange shapes from the original piece of artwork. Even this simple act makes me focus on the shapes and colours that are in the original image. The combination of colours is balanced so beautifully. The orange is balanced by blue. They are complementary colours, so they sit comfortably next to each other on the canvas. In the original, the green is balanced by the red flag. I know it seems like a small amount of colour to balance such a large amount of green, but it does make that flag a focal point in the image. There are also hidden reds in the image because it's a colour that you find in brown and orange. So there is more on the canvas, even if it's more diluted. The colour combinations being used suggest that Loria Norman was thinking more about balancing warm and cold colours rather than trying to balance a specific colour. The blues and greens mix so freely they lose their individual identity. However, when you use a label like blue or green, it's worth remembering that they are just labels. The boundaries between one colour and another can be very blurred. In this image, they are balanced as groups of warm and cold. I know that I will need red on the canvas if I want to balance the green, but I don't want to add it straight away. I'm not creating a copy, I'm trying to learn through the process. That means exploring my connection to the original instead of just trying to replicate the original watercolour. I'm talking about art theory as I'm creating this image, but the process is both intuitive and analytical. At this stage, I've not decided if I'm going to have a ship in my artwork or if I'm going to allow it to become more abstracted. I haven't yet decided on the levels of abstraction that I'm going to use. So I add the basic shape of a ship, knowing that later I can make it look more or less like a ship. I don't have to make the decision at this stage of creating the artwork. In the original, there are many white lines in the clouds and on the rocks. That white outline works really well with the colour combinations used. I decided to incorporate white lines into my image. They are placed differently and they are more abstracted. The lines are created with more in common with a pattern. I'm happy to let the subject matter step back and drift into something different. At this stage, I'm getting a better understanding of the level of abstraction that I want to use. I choose to stretch the black abstract shapes across the canvas. You'll notice the use of repetition. These two shapes are repeated with slight variations. Also, in the top right, the black swirls into shapes similar to the white swirls. Then in the bottom left, it curls up into a large simplified wave. Repeating shapes that are already in the image helps to create a bond between the black and white, and in doing so, it leads to a more cohesive composition. The shapes that have been created have led to the ships looking more like musical instruments. I find myself thinking of harps and similar instruments. I'm massively influenced by music, and when you're creating a piece of artwork, different influences can bleed through. It happens a lot when you let your intuition guide you. Sometimes you can complete an image and it will reveal something about yourself that you didn't know before. That's one of my favourite aspects of creating artwork. It becomes a path to self-knowledge. The shapes of strings become something I want to add more of. I add those dark blue lines from the sky to the centre. I then take light blue lines to the centre from the sea at the bottom, and then I let it flow to the top of the image. The white lines are becoming lost and need to be thicker. I still haven't added the red that's needed to balance the green. It isn't something that you can forget about, because when you look at the canvas, the colours constantly ask for what they need. I've been following Loria Norman's use of colour, so the green isn't separate from the blue. There are places on the canvas that you could label as blue or green, and that's also true for the original. Now I've added the red, it will slightly alter how you see the green and the blue around it and how you would define those colours. This is also true for the original. In the original, the flag is red, but if I change it to orange, it alters the image. The other colours haven't changed, but your perception of those colours becomes altered. You tend to notice the green more because its complementary colour is present on the canvas. Take the red away, and you would be more likely to label this image as blues and oranges. I'm adding more blue to the canvas and more definition to the blue shapes. When we look at the white, you can see that it's heavier in the top part of the image than the bottom. This is because the thickness of the line is so different. I want it to be more equally balanced across the whole canvas. That's better. I'm looking at the canvas and I'm constantly responding to what's in the image. When I look at it now, I can see that those black shapes in the top right and bottom left aren't standing out as much as I would like them to. The outline that I've added gives those black lines more dominance in the image. They are no longer lost by being too close in colour to the dark blue. Adding this bluish green creates a higher amount of contrast, and that helps it to stand out. When I look at my canvas, I can see a lot of yellow, but it doesn't have its complementary colour, purple. The same is true for the original image. If you look at the original image, you can see that it has lots of yellow, but it isn't balanced by the colour purple. The ship could be purple. I tried this in Photoshop just to see what it looks like, but it doesn't work. It adds nothing to the original, and it makes it look less interesting. The main reason it doesn't work is because of the high level of detail in the image. Heavy detail and a large array of colours can be overwhelming. It becomes quite chaotic. When you don't have the purple, it's more balanced because you have a greater balance between the overall colour palette and the level of detail. There's simplicity in the colour palette and it's balanced by the complexity in the level of detail. If you want a balanced composition, you can't just have complexity and you can't just have simplicity. My image doesn't have the same level of heavy detail, so I can add more complexity by broadening the range of colours that I use. Therefore, I can add purple to the image and it will create a more balanced composition. In this instance, purple adds something to the image. I finished the piece by adding some final details. It still resembles ships on the ocean even though the level of abstraction is high. It also still has those references to stringed instruments. Both images are quite different. They are so different that they don't sit comfortably next to each other. The purple in my image creates an imbalance in the image by Loria Norman. Both images look better when they are viewed separately, although viewing them side by side allows you to see the thread that unites them. Both images have a different feel, but that's what you want when you're using a piece to inspire your artistic practice. Through the process, you want to learn about the original artwork and how you connect to the artist. Then you want to create a piece of art that is unique to you. The process has allowed me to learn more about the artwork by Loria Norman, and I do find it an inspirational piece of work. It's demanded my attention, and I haven't been able to look away. It is a beautiful image, and it's been a joy to explore it.